Welcome back. Or if this is your first visit, thank you for choosing to sit down in this little peaceful corner. Today, we will step into the intimate corners of ancient Roman civilization. We will talk about sex. Sex in ancient Rome was a world that was both openly indulgent and bound by honour and power, where every act, from lovemaking and entertainment to religious rituals, was tightly interwoven into the fabric of social life. If you enjoy stories that are both strange and soothing, stay with us. Let sleeping history open the door of time and uncover the secrets of sex in ancient Rome. One summer afternoon in Pompeii, golden sunlight poured down on the volcanic stone streets, illuminating a slightly open ebony door. You step inside, and in the entrance hall it is not gods or heroes who greet you, but a naked man and woman entwined in poses so daring they could make even the 21st century blush. The Pompeii red still burns as if painted yesterday. The curves, the eyes, the hands seem ready to pull you into the scene. The painting is not hidden away in a private room, but placed right at the doorway. A declaration from the owner. This house is wealthy enough, powerful enough to never hide its pleasures. In ancient Rome, sex did not belong only to the bedroom. It was a social ornament, a language of power. From villas in Herculaneum to bathhouses in Rome, erotic imagery was everywhere. Oil lamps shaped like winged phalluses, facinum, wine cups engraved with Bacchus in rapture, tiny street carvings pointing the way to brothels. This display was not merely about seeking pleasure, but sprang from three pillars of Roman culture power. Whoever played the active role in lovemaking was the one in control. Status, flaunting pleasure openly, was flaunting privilege. Religion, sex blended into festivals like Lupercalia and Floralia, blessed by the gods. For Rome, pleasure was power, and something to be proudly displayed. In ancient Rome, you would find yourself at the heart of lavish sexual banquets. In the domus of the nobility from Pompeii to Rome, the dining table was set like a sacred ritual, where eating and drinking were only the prelude to nights of unrestrained fleshly performances that could last until dawn. All around the room, the most powerful figures of the empire were present. The emperor and senators, aristocrats, celebrated poets, wealthy merchants, alongside beauties chosen with meticulous care down to every curve, every glance. On the table, Falernian wine, an aged and precious vintage heavy with the scent of honey and pine resin, flowed freely into silver cups engraved with erotic scenes. Greek incense burned warmly from bronze censers, filling the air with heady fragrance. The soft notes of the lyre intertwined with low laughter, gentle applause and whispered hints of what would unfold when the feast reached its most intimate act. This was not merely a gathering for food and drink, it was a stage for power, pleasure and performance, a convivium where every sense was pushed to its limits. To understand these feasts you must grasp one essential truth. In ancient Rome, sex was not considered something to be hidden. On the contrary, it was displayed as a mark of status and strength. The Romans were deeply influenced by Greek culture, where love and pleasure were once intertwined with philosophy, beauty and art. Yet they stripped away much of the idealization and turned towards something more pragmatic, physical pleasure and social power. They believed that sex was not only for personal satisfaction, but also a way to assert one's status. An erotic fresco in the main hall was not merely meant to arouse, but to send a message. I am wealthy, I am free, and no one dares judge me. In the Roman world, sex was never separate from politics, wealth, or religion. It was part of a citizen's identity, a language of power that, if wielded skillfully, could grant not only pleasure, but influence. When invited to such a feast, you would be offered a seat on a long couch covered in fine leather, reclining against silk cushions, your eyes drawn to the low table piled high, with dishes fit to inspire envy, even in the kings of the East. This was the cena, the principal meal of the Roman, the elite. But on such a night it served only as the prelude steam rose from silver platters. Flamingo tongues, a delicacy reserved for the privileged. Fresh blood clams from the Campanian coast. Roasted peacock marinated in herbs, and golden Amanita caesarea mushrooms beloved by Emperor Augustus. Game meats, especially wild boar and deer, were drenched in the rich salty depth of garum. Roman fish sauce, as briny as the sea itself. Falernian wine was mixed with honey, pepper, cinnamon and resin poured endlessly into silver cups. The Romans never drank wine neat. That was the habit of barbarians, but blended it into fragrant, intoxicating potions that clouded the mind more swiftly. Young slaves, both male and female, attended the tables. Some wore togas so fine the oil lamps revealed every contour beneath. Others were entirely naked save for golden bracelets or crimson silk sashes tied at the waist. For them, the gaze of the guests was no taboo. It was part of the game. When the stomachs were full and the blood ran hot, the feast shifted into the intermezzo. The interval oil lamps were turned down low, their amber glow curling over the skin of everyone present. From the far corner of the room, a troupe of singers and dancers emerged. The lyre and the orloy wove soft melodies accompanied by movements heavy with suggestion. There were nude actors reenacting scenes of lovemaking from mythology, Leda and the swan Hercules and Omphale. Not in the veiled symbolism of art, but in raw and explicit detail. The host might introduce games, singing bawdy Latin verses, guessing the object hidden beneath a robe, often a part of someone's body, or the most popular of all, drawing lots for a partner for what was to come, all unfolded amid laughter shouts and the clinking of cups. When the music shifted into a pounding rhythm, everyone knew the feast had entered its climax, the orgia. Depending on the scale of the gathering, everyone might move into a great hall laid, with cushions and woolen rugs, or split into smaller groups in private chambers. The space became chaotic, yet still guided by unspoken rules. Meretriers, high-class courtesans, and Sinaidi, men in the passive role, joined the slaves in the revelry. For the Romans, gender was no boundary. The distinction lay in the roles of master and servant, strong and weak. A free citizen who maintained the active role preserved his honour no matter who the partner might be. Incense wine and the scent of bare skin mingled into one, music moans and laughter intertwined, creating a sound that even the gods Bacchus or Venus might smile upon in approval. Here in the flicker of oil lamps, pleasure was not merely the enjoyment of the body, it was a declaration of power status and the absolute freedom of Rome's elite. If you think the villa banquet was the height of Roman extravagance, imagine Emperor Nero, famed as both artist and tyrant, hosting a feast upon a lake itself. He launched vast ships whose decks were spread with purple carpets, whose masts were sheathed in gold, whose hulls were carved with erotic reliefs down to the smallest detail. By the light of hundreds of torches mirrored on the water, naked slaves and dancers poured wine while floating stages reenacted the revels of Bacchus and his nymphs. As the music and drink rose to their peak, the private cabins aboard became the setting for pleasures lasting until dawn. The historian Suetonius records that Nero would blend art and indulgence, turning each feast into a living play, and often a naked one. If Nero loved the theatre, Elagabalus, the young 3rd century emperor, was a master of the bizarre. His banquets offered not only a culinary menu, but a menu of pleasures. Each night guests could choose their course from a list of partners, male or female slaves, actors, dancers, even handsome prisoners freshly pardoned for the occasion. Elagabalus was also famous for constantly changing the themes of his banquets. One night might be inspired by the mythology of Venus, another night would recreate a grand hunt followed by enjoying the spoils, in the most figurative sense. His dining halls were often adorned with fresh flowers, sheer silks and oil lamps shaped like sexual organs, a blunt declaration that these gatherings were anything but political meetings. Among the most shocking tales of ancient Rome, few surpass that of Messalina, the wife of Emperor Claudius. The satirist Juvenal recounts that Messalina once challenged Rome's most famous courtesan to an all-night contest to see who could take the most lovers in a single session. The result? The empress triumphed with a number that left even contemporaries' jaws hanging in disbelief. Messalina is remembered not only for her debauchery, but for the way she turned pleasure into a political weapon. Many powerful figures were drawn in or subdued during her private gatherings where sex and power were woven so tightly they could not be separated. In ancient Rome, a feast of pleasure did not always begin beneath the vaulted roof of a domus, but in the warm steam and murmured conversations of the Thermae, the grand public baths frequented by both the elite and commoners alike. Here, the space was divided into the frigidarium, cold room, tepidarium, warm room, and caldarium, hot room. But during special gatherings, these areas transformed into a prelude. Guests would immerse themselves in the pools, the scent of fragrant oils from massage jars drifting through the air. The skilled hands of slaves, often young, attractive, and wearing little more than a sheer strip of cloth, worked the muscles while exchanging suggestive glances. The sound of water lapping against the pool walls, soft laughter, and teasing words all merged into a subtle rhythm, setting the stage for the later acts of the evening. From the Thermae, the party might proceed directly to an out-of-town villa, especially in the region of Baiae, the place writer Seneca called the paradise of pleasure of the empire. Nestled along the Bay of Naples, Baiae was a labyrinth of seaside villas, balconies overlooking the Mediterranean, and gardens hidden behind high walls draped in climbing vines. Some villas seemed built solely to serve indulgence, corridors leading to secret rooms concealed behind heavy wooden doors, where the light from oil lamps illuminated erotic carvings on the walls, hidden passageways connecting bedrooms to private docks, allowing guests to depart discreetly before dawn. On the rooftops, Falernian wine and fresh figs awaited alongside silk-covered cushions. With such a combination, the feast was no longer a single event but a multi-act journey of pleasure. From the warmth of the water, to the lavish banquet table, and finally to the room where every lamp seemed to know exactly what was about to happen. Beyond the lavish feasts of the flesh that so often define the splendour of ancient Roman civilization, Roman attitudes towards sex also reveal a worldview entirely different from our own. In ancient Rome, homosexuality or bisexuality was not considered a sin. The law had no interest in whether two men or two women tangled in bed. But don't mistake this for a utopia of absolute freedom. Rome was a master at creating invisible rules, and in this game, your role in bed mattered far more than your gender. The supreme principle was this: if you were a vir, a freeborn male citizen, the pinnacle of dignity, dignitas, you could only preserve your honour if you always took the active role, penetrator. That was the mark of power, strength, and what the Romans called virtues, true manliness. But if you were foolish enough to take the passive role, receptus, with someone of equal or lower status, congratulations, you had just thrown your honour down the drain. You'd be branded with infamia, a social disgrace powerful enough to strip you of office, turn you into a marketplace punchline, and all but guarantee your name would appear in the biting verses of Juvenal or Martial, complete with endless jabs about your softness. Here's the twist. The always-on-top rule didn't just apply to same-sex relations, it applied to everything. In Roman eyes, surrendering the dominant position meant surrendering power, an act of betrayal against Romanitas, the spirit of a conqueror. In other words, the Romans didn't much care whom you loved, as long as you didn't end up in the wrong position. The Romans borrowed the Greek Rust's eromenos model, where same-sex love was adorned with philosophy and aesthetic ideals, but in their hands the lofty varnish was stripped away, exposing a pragmatic core, the body and pleasure. If in Athens this love was a spiritual journey toward Olympus, in Rome it was simply a dessert after a Bacchic feast, sweet, potent, and something no one in their right mind would skip. In a society that saw sex as power and display, it's no surprise that in this civilization prostitution was not some shadowy, back-alley affair, but a service industry officially recognised and taxed by the state. The term prostitutio didn't appear in criminal law as a crime, but in the tax ledgers as a steady source of revenue. If you wanted to practice the trade, all you had to do was walk into a magistrate's office, hold your head high, and apply for a licentia stupri, the official licence that allowed you to turn your bedroom skills into a livelihood. The Leno, pimp, and Lena, madam, the CEOs of the trade, also had to be licensed. They managed a kind of human resources unlike any other. Instead of sales clerks, they recruited faces and curves that met their standards. But this was Rome. Everything had to be carefully recorded. Once you began working, your name would appear in the Albo Meretricum, the public register of prostitutes, posted in a place where anyone, from an idle senator to a drunk at the tavern, could read it. Once on that list, you officially bore the mark of infamia, legal disgrace, and no matter how many vats of Egyptian perfume you bathed in, your social honour wouldn't be worth more than an empty wine jar. The state wouldn't forbid you from earning money with your body. In fact, it encouraged it by ensuring information transparency. But never forget you would remain a second-class citizen, even if your purse was always fatter than your neighbour's. The Lupanar of Pompeii, the most famous brothel unearthed almost entirely intact, is a quintessential example of the architecture and operation of prostitution in ancient Rome. Stepping into the ground floor, you would see a row of small adjoining rooms, each just large enough for a sturdy stone bed topped with a layer of straw or coarse fabric. On the walls, frescoes vividly depicted various sexual positions. These served both as advertisements for available services and as visual suggestions for customers to choose from. Service prices were recorded in graffiti directly on the walls or near the doorways, reflecting a sense of openness and transparency. The rates were often quite low for basic services, making them accessible to people from many social strata. At the front of the ground floor was a waiting area and a counter where patrons paid before engaging in any services. The upper floor was typically used as living quarters for the prostitutes or arranged as rooms for long-term clients. This separation helped distinguish personal living space from the main working area, while also providing privacy for those who wished to stay overnight. The Lupanar of Pompeii not only reflects the structural and operational layout of a legal brothel in Roman times, but also stands as vivid evidence of the Romans' pragmatic and open attitude toward commercial sex. Imagine strolling through the bustling streets of ancient Rome, where every sound and scent blends into a vivid, colourful tapestry of life. Yet behind moss-covered walls and weathered wooden doors lies a sexual entertainment industry no less diverse and sophisticated. Almost a miniature world, operating under the command of its own Julius Caesar of erotic economics. You pass by working-class women, the meretrices, plying their trade in the cramped rooms of brothels. These might be dim corners of roadside taverns or small spaces along the streets near public baths, where pleasure is sold by the minute at a remarkably affordable rate. Just a few silver coins for a fleeting moment of satisfaction. They are the silent workers who sustain an unseen but vibrant rhythm of the city. But if you wish to elevate your experience, you cannot overlook the courtesans, high-class companions whose sophistication lies not only in the art of lovemaking, but also in conversation, singing, dancing, and the ability to charm you with snippets of philosophy, making you feel as if you were on a date with a philosopher rather than a woman selling her body. These women are not the fare of the common crowd. They are the luxury brands of intimacy for the elite, and their prices rival the most extravagant of goods. As for male prostitutes or meretrices masculae, you would often find them in public baths or at convivium banquets. Most were slaves or poor freemen, ready to serve male patrons, but always under the unwritten rule that if the client was a freeborn citizen, he must take the active role. This maintained both the customer's honour and the intricate social hierarchy. Particularly distinctive were the snidi and exuleti, men who took the passive role, dressing and adorning themselves like women. They appeared at lavish banquets as exotic entertainment, adding a flamboyant touch that blurred the line between pleasure and performance art. If you wandered through the Subura district of Rome, you would see working-class prostitutes operating in roadside taverns and near public baths, places where the quality of service depended heavily on luck and the size of your purse. But if you were a client from the aristocracy, you might be invited to seaside villas, countryside estates, or discreet convivium gatherings. There, the price of a single night's intimacy could equal that of a gold bracelet, and you would leave not only with physical satisfaction, but with stories to recount to friends at the forum, proving that you were not merely wealthy, but also discerning and powerful. In ancient Rome, prostitution was not merely a diversion tucked away in shadowy corners, it was a fully legal business, regulated by the state and taxed with astonishing seriousness. At the lower end of society, just a few asses, the cost of a loaf of bread or a jug of sour wine, would buy you service in a cramped little room so narrow you'd be afraid to swing your arms, with nothing but a coarse straw mat underfoot. The moans and laughter echoing off the walls formed part of the quiet heartbeat of the city's backstreets. But if you belong to the elite, be prepared to pay 10 times as much, not just for a fleeting moment, but for an entire night draped in luxury. Here, the courtesans offered far more than physical pleasure. They could be confidants, storytellers, even accidental philosophers. They could leave you not only in ecstasy, but also armed with tales to boast about at the next gathering, nights where their names were more celebrated than those of certain statesmen. Since the time of Augustus, Roman leaders had no qualms about turning every sigh and gasp in a brothel into revenue for the imperial treasury. The tax known as vectigal ex capturis was levied, collecting every last as from prostitutes and brothel owners. Each coin gathered might go toward paving a stone road or erecting a column engraved with the emperor's name, transforming private pleasure into monuments to the grandeur of the empire. But don't imagine Roman prostitution as a free-for-all without rules. Prostitutes were forbidden from wearing the purple-bordered toga reserved for magistrates and vestal virgins, preventing any confusion between status and profession. Once you entered the trade, your name was recorded publicly in official registers, and it was almost impossible to change careers to anything more respectable. In Rome, you could do whatever you pleased, just don't expect to sell pleasure and keep your honour at the same time. Prostitution in ancient Rome was not confined to the walls of brothels. It spilled out across the city, woven into daily life through the public bathhouses or thermae. Here, you could do far more than simply relax after a long day. These spaces offered the chance to mingle, flirt, and even negotiate in private rooms tucked discreetly away. The baths became a meeting ground where cleanliness and quiet liaisons intertwined. Not far away were the coponae and popinae, taverns where wine and laughter flowed without pause. In many of these establishments, prostitution was an inseparable part of the hospitality package, adding to the lively, boisterous, and often chaotic atmosphere that defined the Roman cityscape. And finally, if you wished to immerse yourself in the entertainment capital of Rome, you would head to Subura, the empire's most infamous red light district. Here, brothels, taverns, and sexual slaves thrived side by side. Regardless of who you were, commoner or noble, you could always find a corner to indulge in your pleasures, a living testament to the old saying, "Where there are Romans, there are endless ways to satisfy every desire." In ancient Roman society, sex was not merely an instinct. It was considered an art form to be studied, practiced, and refined. The Romans were unashamed in exploring sexual positions they believed not only enhanced pleasure, but also promoted health and endurance in one's intimate life. Frescoes, stone carvings, and fragments of pottery uncovered at sites like Pompeii and Herculaneum depict in striking detail a wide range of positions, from simple lying and standing postures to complex, physically demanding ones, all intended to heighten the harmony between two bodies. These positions were not passed down by chance. They were often taught orally or recorded in discreet erotic manuals, quietly circulated among noble households or within medical circles. Such handbooks frequently emphasized a balance between pleasure and physical well-being, underpinned by the belief that a harmonious sex life could boost vitality and guard against sexual debility. The Romans placed particular importance on technique, breathing patterns, rhythm, and selecting positions tailored to each individual to avoid fatigue or injury. Physicians like Galen noted that maintaining a moderate and balanced sexual life was vital for overall health, while warning against excessive indulgence that could weaken the body. Of course, no discussion would be complete without mentioning the array of sexual devices, which were not merely decorative objects but also embodied stories of erotic life and religious symbolism. Among the most distinctive and widely used was the fascinum, a phallus-shaped charm or dildo crafted with remarkable skill from materials such as wood, bronze, and even precious stone. The fascinum was far more than a simple sexual toy. It carried profound cultural significance. The Romans believed that the image of the phallus possessed the power to ward off evil spirits and protect its owner from misfortune. As a result, the fascinum was often hung in homes or worn on the body, serving as a talisman commonly seen throughout Rome and across the vast territories of the empire. This is why fascina can be found in tombs, adorning statues, and even depicted on pottery, a symbol that was at once erotic and protective. Yet the fascinum also had its place in Roman pleasures, acting as a companion that heightened sexual enjoyment and brought novelty to intimate experiences. Wealthy nobles might own intricately carved examples, adorned with gold, silver, or precious stones, while ordinary citizens used simpler versions made from wood or terracotta. Beyond the fascinum, archaeological evidence has revealed other intimate aids, such as rings designed to enhance sensation, or specially shaped objects crafted from natural silicone-like materials, such as sponges or similar substances, used both to increase pleasure and in religious rituals linked to fertility and sexuality. These devices were not exclusive to the elite. They were also common among the lower classes, reflecting a sexual culture that was both rich and diverse. One can imagine that in lavish convivium banquets, alongside fine wine and philosophical discourse, conversations about positions, techniques, and sexual experiences were openly exchanged, an inseparable part of elite Roman culture. Through this knowledge-sharing and open discussion, the art of lovemaking became a vivid, celebrated element of social life, free from prudishness or concealment. So when you step out of that room, take with you the image of a civilization built not only of steel and stone, but also upon the sweet, intricate secrets of love and sexuality. This was the Roman art of intimacy, at once personal, ceremonial, and scientific. But do not imagine Rome as a civilization that emerged in isolation. It absorbed and innovated upon the brilliant legacies of neighbouring cultures. First and foremost, Roman medical knowledge and the art of lovemaking were deeply influenced by Greece, where philosophy, medicine, and art were inseparably intertwined. Theories of balancing the four humours, phlegm, blood, yellow bile, and black bile, and the role of sexuality and health were borrowed from Greek physicians such as Hippocrates, and later expanded upon by Galen. From ancient Egypt, Rome inherited the use of protective amulets, sexual rituals, and distinctive medical techniques. Symbols such as the fascinum were not merely toys but talismans, originating in Egyptian belief systems and embraced by the Romans as an essential part of both sexual and spiritual life. From the East came specialized massage techniques, the use of herbal remedies, and various intimate aids, all of which were gradually and skillfully integrated into Roman life. This blending created a rich diversity in how the Romans approached and cared for sexual health, addressing both the body and the mind. As in many other civilizations, slaves in ancient Rome, despite their devoted service, had no right to defend themselves against acts of violence, including sexual violence. They were regarded as living property, and their bodies could be seized and abused at any moment their owner desired. No law stood on their side, and such pain and humiliation were considered a normal, unavoidable part of life for those who had lost their freedom. By contrast, if a free citizen was raped, it was treated as a grave crime, not only because of the unlawful act itself, but also because it inflicted a profound insult to the individual's honour and dignity. The protection of a citizen's honour was valued so highly that it became a matter of political and social significance, rather than merely a personal criminal offence. Perpetrators could face severe punishments, ranging from fines to imprisonment, depending on the victim's social class and the circumstances. In the Roman arena, physical violence had already become a brutal form of entertainment, and sexual violence could also be employed as a form of punishment. Criminals, slaves, or prisoners of war could be forced to participate in horrific spectacles, which at times included acts of bestiality. In Roman society, bestiality was not only condemned as a reprehensible act, but also served as a calculated instrument of power, applied in special circumstances, particularly as a severe punishment for convicted criminals or slaves guilty of grave offences. In the arena, where brutality reached its peak, prisoners, slaves, or the disgraced could be forced to endure punishments that not only inflicted physical harm, but also struck at the very core of human dignity, such as being compelled to engage in sexual acts with animals. One can imagine the scene. Amid the roaring cheers of a frenzied crowd, the condemned were not only subjected to lashings and blows, but also faced a horrifying form of humiliation, being reduced to the status of beasts, stripped entirely of their humanity. This was not merely corporal punishment, it was a calculated assertion of the master's ruthless authority, a spectacle intended to serve as a stark warning to others. In this context, bestiality became a weapon of psychological terror, designed to instill deep and lasting fear. The social consequences were equally devastating. When a person was forced to lower themselves to such an extent, they were stripped of all rights and standing in the community, becoming the object of absolute scorn. It was the ultimate image of the destruction of human dignity, one that Roman history has recorded with chilling clarity. Of course, bestiality was not a common or accepted part of daily life. It existed as a particularly dark facet of violence and punishment in the ancient world. Nevertheless, Its presence reveals the extreme harshness and cruelty of Roman civilization, where power was often asserted through uncompromising domination over both body and spirit. In this way, one can see that in the world of ancient Rome, power was at times expressed not through glory or triumph, but through the creation of ultimate fear and the complete degradation of the human body, a grim shadow cast across the grandeur of a civilization both brilliant and brutal. In Rome, it is impossible not to know of Lupercalia, the ancient festival steeped in legend. You find yourself swept along with the crowd toward the Palatine Hill, where the cave of Lupercal lies, the fabled place where the she-wolf is said to have nursed the twin brothers Romulus and Remus, founders of the city. Before you stand young, strong men, the Luperci, nearly naked, embodying both vitality and purity. They prepare for the sacred rite of purification by sacrificing a male goat, a symbol of fertility and boundless life force. The sharp slice of the blade through the goat's hide rings out, mingling with the chants of ritual, creating an atmosphere both solemn and brimming with raw energy. Next come the strips of goat hide, called februa, firmly gripped by the Luperci, who swing them with resounding snaps across the backs of the women standing in eager lines. There is no fear here, only bright smiles and eyes full of anticipation, for each stroke is believed to be a blessing for health, fertility, and good fortune. Laughter and cheers merge with the crack of leather, transforming the festival into not just a religious rite but a celebration of life, joy, and communal unity. You feel the air charged with vitality, the young men displaying their sculpted physiques, the lively dances and the songs echoing across the hill. Lupercalia is not merely an ancient ritual. It is a moment when the entire community comes together, expressing strength, joy, and hope for a prosperous future. And as the sound of the leather whips fades into the distance, you're led to Floralia, a festival bursting with colour, steeped in the scent of flowers and alive with music. Here, actors dressed in the sheerest of garments, sometimes nothing more than wisps of fabric brushing against their skin, bring to life performances that are playful, sensual, and brimming with the joy of life and love. Laughter and cheers ripple through the crowd as each clever line celebrates the Roman spirit of freedom and uninhibited expression. Around the stage, graceful dancers move in harmony beneath the spring sky, petals drifting down to rest upon hair and shoulders, like strokes of a living painting in the season of renewal. The music swells, lyres strumming, flutes singing, blending into a vibrant tapestry of sound that beckons all to set aside the burdens of daily life and surrender to pure, unrestrained delight. The crowd is not merely a passive audience, but an active part of the celebration, joining in games and lively contests, their clapping and shouts merging into a chorus of freedom and joy. In Floralia, there is no space for hesitation or reserve, only love, life, and pleasure honoured in their fullest form. A gentle breeze carries the sweet perfume of blossoms, the music's rhythm drawing you deeper into the whirl of festivities, into a world where life and sexuality are not hidden away, but embraced as the most precious gifts of nature and humanity. Floralia stands as a dazzling portrait of Roman joy, a reminder that even in an empire of power and gravitas, there was always room for freedom and the complete celebration of pleasure. Open about sexuality as they might have been, you might imagine love in this era to be romantic and daring. But no, in Rome, marriage was not a matter of the heart, but a contract of power, a grand transaction in which elite families negotiated with money, influence, and calculated strategy. You would not see starry-eyed lovers exchanging passionate glances in the streets of Rome. Instead, you would witness quiet negotiations, lavish banquets where wealthy officials and merchants placed bets on the future of their bloodlines. Bearing a son was not simply a private matter, it was a sacred mission, a burden Roman women carried to ensure their family's lineage did not fade into obscurity. They were less romantic souls and more like machines of bloodline preservation, soldiers standing in the battlefield of family power. And daughters? Not a catastrophe, but they brought with them the immense pressure and expectation to continue producing children, so that the family would not die out, a notion as ruthless as it was pragmatic. Weddings? They were not candlelit promises whispered in the night. but a sequence of solemn rituals infused with power and religion, a public display of just how wealthy and influential your family was. Among the nobility, a wedding could last an entire week, with feasts, theatrical performances, and grand spectacles of music and dance, not merely to honour the couple, but to showcase the might of the entire clan. For the common folk, the celebrations were simpler and more modest, but still observed the necessary rites to mark the beginning of a new chapter in life. But once you understand that marriage was a contract of power, the story of fidelity reveals another shadowy side. For Roman men, adultery was not considered particularly scandalous, almost a privilege, a way to display power and masculinity. They could freely wander outside the marriage, so long as they did not touch someone else's property, meaning another man's wife. This freedom made men powerful and unrestrained, while women, with just a single misstep, would be branded unfaithful, bringing disgrace and disaster upon their family. Families and society placed strict constraints on women, like invisible chains that monitored their every step to prevent them from straying or causing scandal. Roman women did not enjoy the same freedom as men. They lived under close watch, their movements and behaviour regulated by both family and law. Adultery, therefore, was not merely a matter of romance. It was a clear display of the deep inequality in society. It was a stage on which men were cheered and celebrated while women could only suffer in silence. In the world of the Roman elite, marriage was not about love, but a tool to preserve power across generations. This is why consanguineous marriages, between cousins and sometimes even between those with closer blood ties, were not only accepted but encouraged as a strategy to keep the wealth in the family, preventing property and status from slipping into the hands of outsiders. You can imagine that while commoners worried about crops and meals, the upper class was working magic with bloodlines in ways so intricate they could leave an outsider shocked. History is full of famous anecdotes, from emperors to powerful nobles, about relationships that were both scandalous and revealing of the complexities of aristocratic life. Some historians and writers recorded tales of incest within the imperial family, like secrets hidden behind gleaming marble walls, where power plays were conducted quietly but decisively. Though Roman society often appeared strict about morality and ethics, when it came to power and status, the rules became surprisingly flexible. Behaviours condemned among the lower classes were tolerated, or even deliberately overlooked, among the elite. It was a very clear form of class distinction. Ordinary people were expected to uphold the rules, while the upper class could reinterpret them as they pleased, so long as their reputation and power remained intact. You can picture this paradox as an abstract painting bursting with colours, where beauty, disgust, power and morality intertwine in a tangled yet vividly alive composition. And in that painting, incest was not an act universally condemned, but rather a crucial piece in the game of preserving power among Rome's noble families. Hearing this, you might find yourself smiling with a mix of surprise and a touch of disbelief at the boundless creativity of those who held the fate of the empire in their hands. In Roman society, sex was not merely a private matter, but an essential part of the social and political structure. Freedom of expression existed in a variety of relationships, from male-female and male-male affairs to legally regulated prostitution to colourful festivals like Lupercalia and Floralia, where pleasure was celebrated as a symbol of vitality and renewal. Yet at the same time, sexuality was heavily controlled by strict rules, especially for women and those of lower social status. Family honour, social roles and power were all intertwined with how people expressed and restrained their desires. Roman sexuality was also a stage for power, sometimes brutal and violent, made evident in how slaves were stripped of rights, or in harsh punishments like bestiality, one of the cruelest forms of humiliation and psychological terror. This was not simple freedom, but a freedom defined within the boundaries of power, social stratification, and cultural norms. The legacy of these attitudes left deep marks on later European culture. From art and literature to social traditions, the influence of ancient Rome persisted, shaping the way people viewed sex, honour and power. The works of Ovid, Martial and Juvenal are still remembered as witnesses to a culture both proud and complex. By the time you step away from this journey through the sexual world of Rome, you'll realize this is not just a story about pleasure or morality, but an essential part of how humans built their societies, power structures, and identities. A world full of contradictions, yet brimming with vitality and unending creativity, where sex was a language, a weapon, and a legacy left for future generations to ponder. The Roman arena and its most famous battles. Imagine a vast space where tens of thousands of ancient Romans gather, their cheers echoing through the air, every gaze fixed on the movements of steel-clad warriors, ferocious beasts, or tense confrontations where life and death hang in the balance. This is the Roman arena, the unmistakable symbol of ancient Roman entertainment culture. The arena was not merely a stage for bloody battles, but also a meeting place for all layers of Roman society, from powerful officials and nobles to the poorest commoners. It was a symbol of the emperor's authority and the empire itself, a place where he displayed his wealth, strength, and capacity to rule through grand public spectacles. At the same time, the arena carried strong religious significance, serving as a ritual offering to the gods, asking for protection and prosperity for the mighty city of Rome. These spectacles acted as an unmissable visual feast in the spiritual life of the Romans, from satisfying the public's need for entertainment to reinforcing a sense of communal unity. The arena was a space where joy, terror, and power intertwined in a legendary setting. The origins of the Roman arena can be traced back to aristocratic funeral rites during the Roman Republic, around the 3rd–2nd centuries BCE. The earliest duels appeared as part of sacrificial ceremonies to honour the dead, intended as offerings to soothe the spirits of the departed. These early combats laid the foundation for what would eventually evolve into a grand form of public entertainment. Over time, the simple one-on-one duels evolved into far grander spectacles, growing in scale with the introduction of wild beasts such as lions, tigers, and leopards. These animal hunts, venations, were not only a test of strength, but also a symbol of mankind's dominance over the untamed forces of nature. Such contests took place in amphitheatres, the iconic grand stages of Rome. By the time of the Roman Empire, the arena had reached its most dazzling peak. The Colosseum, the greatest symbol of all, was built in the mid-1st century CE under Emperor Vespasian and completed during the reign of his son Titus, becoming the irreplaceable heart of Rome's entertainment. It was not merely the venue for life and death battles, but also a powerful emblem of the emperor's absolute authority, a testament to the empire's dominance and opulence. The combats had transformed from simple duels into elaborate performances, blending martial skill, strategic planning, bravery, and even chance, where the victor was celebrated and the defeated faced a tragic death before the eyes of thousands of fervent spectators. Stepping into an ancient Roman arena, you would be struck not only by the electrifying energy of the crowd, but also by the grandeur and magnificence of the architecture itself. Roman amphitheatres were designed to hold tens of thousands of spectators, while ensuring that everyone, from the lowest classes to the highest nobility, could clearly see every detail of the action. A common feature of Roman arenas was their oval or circular shape, with tiered seating arranged around the central combat area to guarantee unobstructed views for all. The network of passageways and entrances was ingeniously planned, allowing tens of thousands of people to enter and exit quickly and safely, preventing chaos in such massive gatherings. And when speaking of the Roman arena, one cannot overlook the Colosseum, a masterpiece of architecture and engineering in the empire. Built in less than a decade, the Colosseum boasted monumental dimensions, 188 metres long, 156 metres wide, and capable of holding between 50,000 and 80,000 spectators. Its multi-tiered structure was meticulously designed, dividing seating areas according to the different strata of Roman society, from the common people to officials and the nobility, who occupied the prestigious VIP rows. The Colosseum featured as many as 80 entrances of varying sizes, allowing the audience to enter and exit in an orderly and efficient manner, a level of organisation that even modern stadiums could learn from. In addition, its complex system of passageways and staircases made it possible to move between tiers with ease, without causing bottlenecks. What made the Colosseum truly remarkable was the intricate network of underground chambers beneath the arena floor. This was where gladiators, wild beasts, props and equipment were kept and prepared for the spectacles. Trapdoors would open unexpectedly, releasing animals or warriors into the arena in sudden dramatic entrances that astonished and delighted the crowd. The Colosseum was also equipped with a retractable awning, the velarium made from vast sheets of canvas, which could be extended to shield spectators from the sun or rain. This ingenious feat of engineering greatly enhanced the viewing experience, especially in Rome's unpredictable weather. Beyond the Colosseum, the Roman Empire constructed numerous other arenas throughout its vast territories. Although none matched the scale of the Colosseum, these amphitheatres still retained the distinct features of Roman architecture, and served as important centres of cultural entertainment in cities such as Pompeii, Verona, Arles in France, and many others. Each arena stood as a testament to the extraordinary advancement of Roman engineering, blending functionality with architectural artistry, while also preserving the blood-soaked and heroic tales of the games, where power, honour and human life were displayed in a manner both ruthless and mesmerising. The gladiators, the magnificent warriors, were the very soul of the Roman arena. They were not merely slaves or prisoners forced into combat. Some willingly hurled themselves into this harsh life in pursuit of glory, wealth, or simply because they had no other choice. Gladiators were classified according to their weapons and distinct fighting styles, creating colourful, dramatic matches. Mumio, armed with a large shield and a long sword clad in heavy armour, resembled the classic Roman legionary. Retiarius, unarmoured and lightly equipped, carried only a net and a trident, using the net to ensnare opponents before striking. 3X, wielding a curved sword and a small shield, fought with agility and deceptive, unpredictable moves. Secutor, the eternal rival of the Retiarius, wore enclosed armour with only eye openings, designed to prevent the net from entangling him. The lives of gladiators unfolded within the training schools Ludus, harsh and disciplined places where they honed their combat skills, built camaraderie, and developed unique strategies. They were the stars of the arena, sometimes admired even more than politicians. Spectators didn't just watch a fight. They became invested in the gladiators' stories of courage, sacrifice, and at times tragedy. If gladiators were the realm of men, then the Venetians were the grand spectacle of wild beasts, delivering thrills and astonishment to the audience. Battles between humans and fierce animals, lions, leopards, elephants or bears, became an indispensable part of major festivals. These animals were often imported from distant lands such as Africa and the Middle East, symbolising the raw power of the untamed wilderness that the Roman Empire sought to conquer and subdue, projecting its image of absolute power. Each hunt and confrontation between man and beast served as a symbol of human strength and dominance over the natural world. And if you think the arena was limited to battles on land, think again. The Naumachia were grand, simulated naval battles staged with breathtaking spectacle right in the heart of the city, where an arena or an artificial basin was flooded with water to recreate vivid, large-scale sea battles. The staging of these events was extraordinarily complex, involving hundreds of warships and combatants transformed into sailors, reenacting either historical or imagined naval battles. Spectators were given the sensation of witnessing real maritime warfare, making the atmosphere more electrifying and intense than ever. Beyond entertainment, the arena also served as a public stage for the execution of the condemned, a brutal display meant to intimidate the populace and reinforce the authority of the state. These punishments were deliberately designed to shock and horrify, serving both as a deterrent and as a grim lesson for the masses. Prisoners could be torn apart by wild beasts, burned alive, or subjected to other forms of savage torture. Some were crucified, others buried alive. Each execution was a blood-soaked spectacle, blending both didactic purpose and morbid entertainment, reminding all present of the steep price of crime and disobedience. Within these walls, countless bloody contests took place, some of which have become legendary, remembered and retold through the ages. First and foremost must be the inaugural games of the Colosseum in AD 80, held under the reigns of Vespasian and Titus. Imagine yourself standing among tens of thousands of roaring spectators, the thunderous cheers echoing through the vast expanse of the Colosseum, Rome's monumental symbol of power and culture. It is the year AD 80. Emperor Vespasian has recently passed away, and his son Titus has ascended the throne, hosting a grand opening ceremony for the newly completed arena. The celebration lasted an astonishing 100 consecutive days, an unprecedented festival in history. bringing together thousands of fearless gladiators and countless wild beasts from the far reaches of the empire. Each day unfolded as a series of bloody yet artful spectacles, tense one-on-one duels, thrilling hunts, and even staged naval battles that left audiences breathless. The purpose of the event went far beyond mere entertainment. It was a bold political statement. Titus and the Flavian dynasty sought to declare to the entire empire that Rome remained unshakably strong and its power unassailable. The Colosseum was not just an arena. It was a symbol of dominance, a grand display of the empire's might and wealth. You can almost picture the crowd streaming in, the deafening cheers, the smell of smoke and animal hides, the clash of metal in desperate combat, all combining into a vivid, unforgettable experience. It was a festival where power and the thin line between life and death were masterfully intertwined beneath the Roman sun. Long before the Colosseum's grand opening, however, the Roman arena had already been the stage for an extraordinary story of freedom and the will to live, the uprising of Spartacus. Spartacus was a gladiator, a soldier captured and enslaved, forced to fight in brutal spectacles for the amusement of the Roman populace. But he refused to accept his fate as a mere plaything for the wealthy and powerful. In 73 BC, Spartacus, along with hundreds of other gladiators, broke free from a training school in Capua, sparking the largest slave revolt in Roman history. Under Spartacus's leadership, the rebels quickly grew into a formidable army, launching a series of raids and battles across the Italian peninsula, leaving Rome scrambling to suppress them. The revolt lasted nearly 3 years, standing as a direct challenge to the empire's authority and inspiring generations with its defiant spirit and quest for freedom. Although Spartacus and his followers were eventually crushed in a brutal defeat, the image of the courageous gladiator who rose against oppression remained etched in the memory of Rome and in the minds of future generations. His rebellion transformed the way people saw the arena, not merely as a stage for entertainment, but as a place where even the smallest of men could become symbols of resistance and the unyielding desire to live. The arena was not only the domain of gladiators and wild beasts, it was also the stage for an emperor who enjoyed stepping down onto the sands of the Colosseum, where fearless warriors faced death head-on. That emperor was Commodus, one of the most eccentric and controversial rulers in Roman history. Commodus did not see the arena merely as a venue for displaying imperial power. He treated it as his personal playground. Donning armour, wielding a sword, and engaging directly in duels with gladiators, he turned the Colosseum into his own private stage. It was not uncommon for him to win easily against opponents who had been carefully arranged to lose. Yet the sight of an emperor, the head of the Roman Empire, sweating and bleeding on the arena floor, raised eyebrows among the Roman elite, provoking strong disapproval. To many, Commodus's actions were unworthy of an emperor's dignity, diminishing the sanctity of the imperial throne. But to Commodus himself, this obsession was a way to assert his dominance and deify his image, portraying himself as an unbeatable gladiator in the eyes of the people. However, his fights were often more theatrical than genuinely life-threatening, leading many to see them as farcical displays rather than true festivals of courage. While Commodus turned the arena into his personal stage, another gladiator left his mark through unwavering loyalty and an unshakable fighting spirit. That man was Flamma, a legendary name in the history of Roman gladiators. Flamma was renowned not only for his extraordinary strength and masterful combat skills, but also for his remarkable steadfastness. Over the course of his career, he fought in 34 matches, winning 21 and drawing 9, numbers rare enough to inspire admiration. What made him truly exceptional was that when offered his freedom, a precious gift granted to gladiators after years of service, Flamma refused, choosing instead to remain in the arena, declaring, "The arena is my home." Flamma's image became a vivid symbol of loyalty, iron will, and indomitable strength. He was not merely a warrior, but an idol for those who shared his fate, proof that a gladiator was not always a man forced into battle, but could also be someone who chose his own path, bound to the glory and honour of the arena. Beneath the dazzling splendour of the Roman arena, where thousands of spectators roared in excitement and breathtaking battles unfolded, there existed a dark side that could never be concealed, the unrelenting brutality and the price of life paid in blood and tears. The arena was not merely a stage to showcase combat skills, it was also a mass killing ground where thousands, from gladiators to prisoners and slaves, were forced to confront death. Casualty numbers during major events, such as the inauguration of the Colosseum, are said to have reached into the thousands, making the arena a symbol of the savage violence that Roman society accepted as an integral part of public life. Stories of the cruelty that took place in the arena are abundant. Gladiators were sometimes tortured before entering battle. Public executions were carried out in horrifying fashion, being torn apart by wild beasts burned alive or crucified in the middle of the grand stage. Prisoners could be sentenced to face powerful predators such as lions or elephants, with no hope of survival, purely to satisfy the crowd's bloodlust and reinforce the emperor's authority. Not everyone embraced this barbarity. Some Roman philosophers, such as Seneca, openly condemned these public spectacles of violence, seeing the arena as a manifestation of moral decay and the erosion of humanity. Early Christians were especially outspoken in their opposition to the executions and brutality, denouncing them as deceitful and inhumane acts that could never be justified. Yet, in a society that glorified power and strength as much as Rome did, the arena remained an inseparable part of its identity, a stage for might, for life and death, where ambition, cruelty and glory were laid bare for all to see. The audience merged into the crowd's frenzy, swept up in the roar of the masses, seemingly forgetting that behind these spectacles lay countless lives taken never to return. The Roman arena lives on not only in history through stories and chronicles, but also in the legendary archaeological remains that allow us to better understand the life and culture of this glorious age. The Colosseum, an immortal symbol of Rome, has endured centuries of destruction from both nature and humankind, yet it still retains much of its solid and imposing structure. Excavations and research at the site have not only helped restore the image of one of the greatest architectural achievements of the ancient world, but also revealed countless secrets about the arena, from the complex underground system beneath the arena floor, where gladiators and wild animals were kept before entering, to the mechanical lifts used to raise the floor and create dramatic surprise effects for the audience. Beyond the Colosseum, numerous smaller arenas in the provinces of the Roman Empire have also been excavated, showing how widespread this deadly sport truly was. These arenas were usually smaller in scale, but still built in the same architectural style, with tiered seating and designated passageways for participants. Artifacts discovered at these arena sites offer vivid glimpses into the lives of gladiators. Weapons such as swords, spears, clubs, and helmets have been found in remarkably good condition, revealing the diversity and craftsmanship of their design. Some helmets are engraved with decorative patterns or unique emblems, possibly representing specific gladiator groups or their places of origin. These suits of armour were not only tools of combat, but also symbols of honour and identity. In addition, the skeletal remains of gladiators, bearing marks of injuries, allow archaeologists and forensic scientists to reconstruct the brutal reality of these matches. Deep stab wounds, severe cuts, and clear signs of unforgiving life-or-death combat. These findings not only confirm descriptions from ancient texts, but also provide a more tangible understanding of the endurance and skill required of these warriors who risk everything on the arena floor. Such artifacts and ruins, like precious fragments of history, breathe life into the past, enabling modern audiences to vividly feel the excitement, tension, and sheer brutality of Roman arena battles. Through them, we not only admire the architectural genius and physical prowess of the ancient Romans, but also gain a deeper understanding of their culture, beliefs, and the way they confronted life and death. The Roman arena, with its life-or-death battles between man and wild beast, has endured for millennia to become a powerful symbol in modern culture and art, a reflection of both the brutality and the courage of humankind. The image of the arena, especially the magnificent Colosseum, has repeatedly appeared in works of art, literature and cinema as an emblem of the might of the Roman Empire and the drama of relentless combat. From the grand paintings of Renaissance masters to thrilling historical novels to blockbuster films like Gladiator and Ben-Hur, the arena has served as a captivating backdrop for stories of glory, betrayal, loyalty, and the yearning for freedom, retold with vivid intensity. Beyond being a symbol of brutality, the arena also stands as a testament to extraordinary bravery. Gladiators, whether slaves, criminals, or volunteers, became archetypes of strength and unyielding will, fighting to their last breath. Their image lives on in collective memory as valiant warriors who accepted death in pursuit of honor or freedom, creating a paradoxical union between violence and human dignity. The legacy of the Roman arena has deeply influenced modern forms of competitive sport. Martial arts, wrestling, boxing, and even combative team sports on the field today all echo, in part, the fierce competition, daring spirit, and combat skills once celebrated in the ancient arena. The very idea of a fair fight between opponents, with clear rules and the presence of a passionate audience, can trace its roots back to this Roman tradition. Thus, when we look upon the grassy expanse where the Colosseum once towered, or watch a film about a courageous gladiator, we're not merely absorbing a piece of history. We're connecting with a living cultural heritage, where strength, artistry, and human instinct were most vividly intertwined. The Roman arena was not just a stage for violence, but an immortal symbol of willpower and faith in human glory, enduring through the test of time. The life of Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar was born into a patrician family, a lineage of ancient Roman nobility, but not among the wealthiest or most powerful houses of the city. He belonged to the gens Julia, which claimed descent from the goddess Venus, a connection that not only bestowed a touch of mythological prestige upon the family, but also contributed to Caesar's pride and reputation as a man of noble blood. Nevertheless, the family's financial situation was far from abundant, which meant that from an early age, Caesar had to work harder than many of his aristocratic peers to establish his position. Caesar's childhood was a blend of strict education and military training. He studied literature, philosophy, and the art of oratory, skills essential for anyone with political ambitions in Rome's fiercely competitive society. At the same time, military training was also emphasized, preparing him for the future he already anticipated. A life that would inevitably be entangled in fierce struggles for power. A profound influence on Caesar came from his uncle, Gaius Marius, a legendary general who had reshaped the Roman army through bold reforms. Marius was also a central figure in Rome's civil wars of the time, and the stories Caesar heard in his youth about these conflicts and political battles sharpened his political instincts and steeled his resolve for decisive moments. When he stepped onto the political stage of Rome, Julius Caesar was unafraid to begin from the lowest positions, the essential rungs in the ladder of the Republic's political hierarchy. He served as quaestor, a financial magistrate, and later as aedile, responsible for public works and organising games and festivals, roles that allowed him to build connections with the people and gain visibility among the masses. In his role as aedile, Caesar masterfully used public festivals as a tool for self-promotion. He organised lavish celebrations that drew huge crowds, creating a lasting impression of his generosity and influence. These were not merely grand feasts, but calculated displays of power and political allure, subtle yet effective steps that helped him build a firm foundation in the hearts of the people. Alongside honing his skills in oratory, Caesar quickly forged alliances with powerful figures. The first and most influential of these was with Pompey the Great and Crassus, two of the most prominent political leaders of the era. This alliance, later known as the First Triumvirate, enabled Caesar to overcome early obstacles, consolidate his power, and accelerate his climb toward the pinnacle of Roman politics. Caesar's propaganda campaigns unfolded not only on the political stage, but also through Rome's media of the time. The Acta Diurna, daily public notices, and an extensive network of loyal supporters across various social classes. His intelligence and finesse in image building steadily turned him into one of the most prominent and respected figures in the eyes of the populace. By the early years of the 1st century BC, Julius Caesar understood that to succeed in Roman politics, where power was fragmented and intrigue was part of daily life, he needed a strong alliance. Thus he joined forces with two of the most powerful men of the era, Pompey the Great and Crassus, the wealthiest man in Rome, to form the First Triumvirate. This was not a public alliance, but a secret arrangement to share power, control the Senate, and shape Rome's future. With the backing of Pompey and Crassus, Caesar swiftly rose to high office. However, the triumvirate was a double-edged sword. When Crassus was killed in battle against the Parthians in what is now Iran, Iraq, the balance within the alliance collapsed. Pompey, once Caesar's close ally, began to see him as a dangerous rival, especially as Caesar's fame soared with his military victories in Gaul. The Roman aristocracy, steeped in conservative tradition and deeply committed to the authority of the Senate, came to view Julius Caesar as a direct threat to the Republic. Political conflict grew increasingly bitter, as rival factions vied for influence through public accusations, clandestine plots, and open opposition. Trust among former allies began to fracture, and the struggle for power within Rome entered its most intense phase. While the Roman political arena seethed with intrigue, Julius Caesar secured his place in history through his legendary military campaigns in Gaul, territory that today encompasses much of France. This was one of the largest and most successful military operations in Roman history. Caesar was not only a brilliant strategist, but also a courageous and steadfast commander. He led his legions across rivers, dense forests and vast plains, confronting resilient Gallic tribes such as the Helvetii, the Belgae, and the forces of Vercingetorix. Through a combination of siege warfare, tactical maneuvers, and supply line disruption, Caesar gradually broke the resistance of these tribes, forcing them either to surrender or to ally with Rome. Victory in Gaul brought the Roman Republic vast new territories and abundant resources, but it also gave Caesar something far more valuable: a fiercely loyal and battle-hardened army willing to follow him to the very end. His prestige and fame reached unprecedented heights, making him one of the most powerful figures in Rome, yet his military triumphs and rising prominence only deepened tensions with Pompey, once his close ally. By 49 BC, as Caesar prepared to return to Rome, he was ordered to disband his army and relinquish his military command, a move that would leave him politically vulnerable to Pompey and the senatorial elite. In a bold and fateful decision, Caesar crossed the Rubicon River, the northern boundary of Italy, with his loyal legions. This act was tantamount to declaring war on the Roman state itself, for under Roman law no general was permitted to bring troops into Italy. His famous words, "Alea iacta est," the die is cast, immortalized this moment as the turning point that sparked a brutal civil war. The ensuing conflict between Caesar and Pompey raged across Italy and beyond, culminating in Caesar's decisive victory at the Battle of Pharsalus in modern-day Greece in 48 BC. Pompey fled to Egypt, where he was ultimately assassinated, clearing the path for Caesar to become the most powerful man in Rome. His triumph in the civil war not only cemented his absolute authority, but also marked the beginning of the end for the Roman Republic, paving the way for the emergence of the Roman Empire under the rule of subsequent emperors. After securing victory in the civil war and attaining supreme power, Julius Caesar did not stop at consolidating his position. He harboured the ambition to completely restructure the Roman political system. In 44 BC, he bestowed upon himself the title Dictator Perpetuo, dictator for life, a position that had previously been granted only on a temporary basis during times of emergency. Caesar's direct and absolute control, bypassing the traditional democratic framework in the Senate, struck the Roman aristocracy and traditional statesmen as a heavy blow to the long-standing republic. They feared that the liberties and powers once shared within the republican system had now been erased, and that Rome would soon fall into the grip of personal dictatorship. Moreover, Caesar embarked on sweeping reforms, overhauling the legal system, improving the rights of the lower classes and soldiers, and initiating major infrastructure projects to rebuild and beautify the city of Rome. Yet in the eyes of the conservative nobility, these measures only made him more dangerous, a man capable of reshaping the very face of Rome and threatening their privileges and status. Political tensions reached a breaking point, and Caesar's life became more perilous than ever. On March 15th, 44 BC, the infamous Ides of March, he was assassinated at the Theatre of Pompey by a group of senators, including trusted allies such as Brutus and Cassius, who conspired to end his rule. Caesar's death not only ended the career of one of Rome's greatest figures, but also marked the demise of the Republic. In the aftermath, the struggle for power continued, ultimately culminating in the establishment of the Roman Empire under the reign of Augustus, Caesar's adopted son and heir. The transition from republic to empire was a complex historical turning point, but Julius Caesar's role in paving the way for this new era cannot be denied. standing both as a symbol of personal power and as proof of the inevitable transformations that history demands. On March 15th, 44 BC in ancient Rome, a momentous historical event took place. The assassination of Julius Caesar, the most powerful figure of the Roman state at the time. Julius Caesar, who had conquered vast territories and ruled the state with the title of dictator for life, became the target of a group of senators who feared the excessive concentration of power and the potential collapse of the Roman Republic. The conspiracy, led by Gaius Cassius Longinus and Marcus Junius Brutus, was carefully planned to take place at the Theatre of Pompey, the meeting place of the Senate. They gathered about 60 members, many of whom had once been friends and allies of Caesar. On the fateful day, as Caesar entered the chamber, the conspirators suddenly surrounded him and stabbed him a total of 23 times. According to ancient accounts, in his final moments Caesar saw Brutus, a man he deeply trusted, and uttered the famous words, "Et tu, Brute? You too, Brutus?" expressing the ultimate sense of betrayal. This event shook Rome to its core and altered the course of Roman history forever. The assassination did not bring about the outcome its leaders had hoped for. Instead of saving the Republic, it plunged the political situation into chaos, leading to a series of civil wars and ultimately the transformation of the Roman Republic into the Roman Empire under Augustus. The assassination of Julius Caesar is considered one of the most tragic and significant events in world history, reflecting the tension between personal power and collective interest, between dictatorship and democracy, and revealing the deep complexities of ancient Roman politics. Julius Caesar was not only a brilliant general or a shrewd politician, he was also a symbol of transformation who changed the destiny of Rome, paving the way for the birth of the glorious Roman Empire. His actions and decisions marked a turning point, transforming the chaotic ancient Roman Republic into a powerful, unified, and more structured empire. Politically, Caesar was the man who brought an end to this era of the Republic, with its once powerful, yet increasingly dysfunctional Senate. He concentrated power in his own hands through the role of dictator perpetuo, ruler for life, laying the foundation for the autocratic rule of the emperors who followed. This not only altered the structure of political power but also shaped the way the Roman state would operate for centuries to come. Militarily, Caesar was a genius in both strategy and tactics, achieving resounding victories in his campaigns to conquer Gaul. These triumphs not only expanded Rome's territories to encompass much of what is now Western Europe, but also elevated the prestige and military might of Rome throughout the ancient world. His skill in organising and commanding armies became a model for generations of military leaders after him. The image of Julius Caesar transcends historical boundaries, becoming an endless source of inspiration for Western culture and art. From epic works, tragedies, and paintings to modern historical films, Caesar remains a symbol of power, betrayal, and human tragedy. The phrase "et tu, Brute" is not only emblematic of ultimate betrayal, but also a testament to some of the fiercest power struggles in human history. Caesar also left his mark in other fields, such as calendar reform, with the introduction of the Julian calendar, forming the basis of the Gregorian calendar used today. He cemented his legacy not only as a ruler, but also as a builder of civilization. Today, Julius Caesar is remembered as a historical figure of immense symbolic power, both a hero and a tragic figure, who ushered in a new era in the history of Rome and the world. His legacy stands as proof of the strength of individual will, the far-reaching influence of power, and the complex consequences of human politics. The life of Julia the Elder. Julia the Elder, the famous Roman princess, was born in 39 BC, a time of great historical upheaval as the Roman Republic waned and the empire began to take shape under the authority of her powerful father Augustus. Julia was the firstborn daughter of Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, and his first wife, Scribonia, though some historical sources claim her mother was Livia Drusilla, Augustus's second wife. Regardless, no one disputed Julia's special position in the newly established imperial family, where she was regarded as the first precious jewel of the court. From a young age, Julia bore a heavy burden. She was not only the daughter of an emperor, but also the most important political bridge for Augustus to consolidate his power and extend his influence through marital alliances. As the first princess of the new dynasty, Julia was not simply a member of the family. She was a strategic piece in the ruthless political game of ancient Rome. In the social context of the time, princesses, especially those of imperial blood, were expected to use marriage as a tool to unite powerful families. For this reason, Julia was carefully groomed in appearance, education, and manners to become a symbol not only of beauty, but also of soft power, a form of influence wielded through the promise of marriage rather than through military force. Julia's first marriage took place when she was still very young, to Marcus Claudius Marcellus, the nephew of Augustus, who was seen as a crucial piece in the strategy to strengthen the imperial family's power. This was not a romantic love story, but a calculated union between two powerful branches intended to form a solid alliance. However, the marriage was cut short by Marcellus's sudden death, leaving Julia once again a passive pawn on the political chessboard. Next, Augustus swiftly arranged Julia's second marriage to Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa, one of his closest friends, as well as one of Rome's most brilliant and loyal generals. Agrippa not only brought Augustus resounding victories on the battlefield, but also served as a key pillar in the administration of the state. This marriage granted Julia not only a prestigious title, but also a central role in the web of imperial power, as Agrippa could be considered Augustus's right-hand man. The couple had several children together, each of whom would later become crucial pieces in future political alliances. Yet Julia's life did not end there. After Agrippa's death, Augustus made a calculated and in many ways risky move. He arranged for Julia to marry Tiberius, the son of his second wife, Livia, a man Augustus was never particularly fond of. The purpose of this marriage was to secure the imperial succession, creating a strong bond between the Julian and Claudian lines, even though Julia and Tiberius themselves had little affection for one another. This union reflected the harsh reality of the era. Marriage was not a matter of the heart, but a tool to preserve power and the purity of the imperial bloodline. Through these marriages, Julia was not merely a wife or mother, but a living embodiment of Roman politics, where personal fate was often overshadowed by the interests of family and state. Every step she took, every alliance forged through marriage, contributed to the intricate and powerful tapestry of the Augustan dynasty, a dynasty in which Julia was an indispensable figure. As the first princess of the Augustan dynasty, Julia the Elder was carefully crafted into a symbol of the virtue and purity that Roman society expected from the imperial family. From public ceremonies to grand state events, Julia consistently appeared as the model of a royal daughter, embodying traditional values of chastity and morality, thereby reinforcing the prestige and honour of Augustus's household. However, that image was only the surface of a far more complex reality in ancient Roman society. Julia regularly took part in religious rites, public festivals, and formal court receptions, where she was not merely an attendee but a spiritual emblem representing the prosperity and stability of the imperial household. Each of her appearances in the political and social arena was meticulously staged to project messages of power and propriety, serving as a subtle yet potent instrument in Augustus's effort to present the imperial family as untouchable. Julia also influenced broader perceptions of the role and image of elite Roman women. She embodied the fusion of political power and social status, demonstrating that imperial women were not merely figures in the background, but active extensions of state policies and alliances. Nevertheless, she was tightly bound by rigid moral codes and societal expectations, constraints that would eventually fuel the conflicts and turbulence of her life. Yet the woman once celebrated as the rose of the Augustan court would become the centre of sensational love scandals that shook the whole of ancient Rome. Beneath the glittering facade of the perfect princess, Julia engaged in extramarital affairs that not only scandalized the aristocracy, but also deeply troubled and even infuriated her powerful and strict father, Augustus. Rumours swirled about illicit romances, all-night revelries, and sleepless nights spent with nobles, actors, and even slaves. Stories whispered in forums and private gatherings alike. The public's gaze turned from her dazzling public persona to the shadowy intrigues behind the palace curtains. These affairs not only tarnished Julia's personal reputation, but also inflicted serious damage on the honour of the Augustan household, undermining Augustus's relentless efforts to project an image of moral purity and virtue for his dynasty. Unable to tolerate further disgrace, Augustus took decisive action to protect the honour of the imperial family and uphold social order. In 2 CE, Julia was charged with adultery and dishonouring the royal household. She was exiled to the remote, desolate island of Pandateria, a place with no path back. This was not merely a personal punishment, but also a powerful message from Augustus to all of Roman society. The authority and dignity of the imperial family could not be challenged or shamed, even by his own daughter. Banished for her crimes, Julia the Elder was sent to the cold and barren island of Pandateria, known today as Ventatine. From the glittering heart of power, she fell into isolation, surrounded by the vast unending sea, with only the wind and the sound of crashing waves for company. Life in exile was nothing like the splendour and laughter of courtly banquets. On Pandateria, Julia endured profound loneliness, kept under constant watch by guards, her every connection to the outside world severed. Those years were likely an endless chain of longing for home, of bitter regret, and of deep shame. Never once was she allowed to return to Rome, no matter how fiercely her heart yearned for reunion with her family. As time passed, rumours of Julia's life in exile faded into the current of history, yet the image of a once powerful princess brought low and swallowed by darkness remained a poignant reminder, stirring pity in all who heard her story. Julia the Elder was more than just a historical figure. She was a vivid symbol of the harsh limits imposed on power and dignity within the Roman imperial court. Her scandal prompted Augustus to tighten moral legislation, reinforcing strict rules on family virtue in order to preserve the unshakable image of his dynasty before the public. In the historical record, Julia's image is a curious blend of captivating beauty, imperial privilege, and personal tragedy. She embodies the darker side of royal life, where personal freedom is suffocated by responsibility and the heavy weight of societal tradition. Moreover, Julia's story leaves a profound lesson on how Roman society perceived and controlled the power of women. No matter how great their influence, it was bound by the limits set by others, a difficult test of fairness and freedom in the history of ancient Rome. One can imagine Julia, once vibrant and proud, forced to bow her head before the storm of power and morality, a tragedy woven from the threads of authority, honour, and passions that could not be tamed.